What's going on, guys? Zuko back with another Shadowlands video. How are y'all doing? I hope you're doing very well. Grab your coffees, buckle up. We're going to start part 2 of the sort of the current state of rating. This is what I'm reviewing. It's from Max put this out. It's got obviously Nagura and J.B, and it had Asmongold in it in the earlier part of the episode in part 1. He had to leave for some reason. I think he was just busy on that day, but we are reviewing this. I'm going to go through. I have a bunch of notes again on the second half of this video, a bunch of different timestamps, lots of questions for you guys that I want to get into a conversation with you. So let's get into that. And without further ado, I'll start off with this first topic here, which is going to be Max talking about Season 4. Let me just give you a really quick preview of what this episode's going to be about. Basically, there's some talk about Season 4 and how it's kind of like the new design for future content in the game. We're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk about loot in the game as kind of the system that you chase and progress, and like, is that a good thing? Like all the different details around how loot kind of operates right now in World of Warcraft. And then we get in a little bit to maybe alternative raid modes. That might be a good idea for Blizzard in the future. And then there's some Mythic Plus stuff at the end that we get into as well. So let's get right into it. Max talks first about Season 4 and will it be easy? What's the new affix going to be like? Is it just going to be kind of a loot pinata? And is that good for the game? I'll get into that.
I really feel like there's going to be strats and ways to make these pretty doable, but it also mentions that the hard part of these fights is like going to be dealing with these affixes, I think. And that's why I don't think they're going to try to make the actual base raids very, very difficult. I think this season...
Sorry, just to make sure we're clear, this is about Season 4 Fated Raids. Max is saying he doesn't think that Blizzard's going to make the raids difficult because there's going to be this new affix.
Will be loot pinata season, and I think the community wants it a lot, and it kind of begs the question, and I wanted to answer this earlier. This is actually a Yumi TV. This is a Growl take. Would the game be better or worse, JB, if on the very first day of this season you just had full BIS?
So this is shifting quickly into a new topic, but it's kind of piggybacking off of the first one. And I think that I do think it would be really interesting if Season 4 was easy. I think it's going to just be easier in general because we've already seen the raids that are there. We've seen Mathria, we've seen Sanctum, we've seen Sepulchre. So the hard part about, I think, most initial new seasons in WoW is that the raid is unknown. You don't know what you're supposed to do. There are video guides on how to like do them all before they come out, but you still have to do the raids, and you've never done them before, and there's little nuances that you don't understand. We've done them all now. We know all the raids, so I feel like it's going to be easier right away. And the Fated affix, I don't think is going to be that difficult from what I understand about it. So what Max is kind of proposing here is like, will Season 4 just be like a big loot pinata? Like we're getting tons and tons of loot, and everybody's having fun doing it. And if that's true, if that turns out to be the case, is that just a good model for going forward with raids in World of Warcraft? Should raids be extremely difficult like they are right now, like they've kind of become in Sanctum? They become gradually more difficult over time. Or should they just be really fun? Or should they just be like, not necessarily loot pinatas, but like it's an interesting argument. I want to hear what you guys think about that. Do you think that raids should just be easier and more fun? And would that make the game just more fun for all of us? Or should they be as difficult as they are today? Now, Max and JB are going to shift into, would the game be better if you didn't have to hunt for loot at all?
So this is, I have to take a step back here because I recognize that my preferences in this game are fairly divergent from, I think, the average player. I would be thrilled if I woke up one day and Blizzard was like, we've just made every server a tournament realm. There is no more loot progression or any of that shit. Like, you just have all of your best gear all the time. You can pick whatever you want. You can, craft any amount of legendaries you want. That, you just have everything immediately. I would love that, and I would not stop playing. Like, I think there's
that's a good point there. That's an interesting point that JB
among
makes.
The community, that if you had instant loot, a lot of people would be like, well, there's no reason for me to log in anymore. That was the only reason I played the game, was to like get BIS gear, and I have it, and all my motivation's gone. I'm going to log out till next season.
So this is really interesting. I think like I'm going to take this from a personal example for me right now, which is that I'm on my rogue right now. If you guys have watched the last bunch of like Twitch streams that I've been doing, I'm trying to farm the Poxstorm sword on my rogue, and I'm farming and farming and farming. I enjoy that farming. I actually don't mind it at all. It gives me something to do in the game. And like, I like to play this game for the challenge and to get achievements. So I want to get like AOTC. I want to get Keystone Hero. I want to get 3000 IO. Like every season now, I think that's something that I really want to accomplish. Those are goals that I have. That's on like this side of the pendulum. On the other side of the pendulum, so this has nothing to do with loot. The other side of the pendulum says, I do also want to get loot. I don't actually care if I get the absolute best 285 on all slots loot. I don't actually care about that. But I do want high-end loot so that I can do the most damage, the most healing that I can possibly do, because that's also really fun. And I like both of those things together. And I think like what JB is sort of talking about here is like he doesn't care at all about chasing loot. He just has fun playing the game. And I think that that's not the case for your average player. I really want to hear what you guys think about this idea in particular. Why do you play World of Warcraft? That's what we're talking about. Do you play because you enjoy the content, like Mythic Plus and raiding? There's a challenge there. You like overcoming that challenge. Are you doing it just because you want to get a bunch of achievements? Because that also feels really good. I'm not downplaying any of this, by the way. I think all these things are legitimate reasons to play. Do you play it just to chase the loot and get your eye level as high as you can possibly go? Are you doing it so that you have kind of bragging rights in terms of I got cutting edge and I can show everybody that I got cutting edge? Like, again, these are all legitimate reasons to play the game. I would love to hear why you guys want to play the game. But for me in particular, when it comes to this question about like, would the game be better if you just started with all the BIS gear and never had to chase gear at all? Me, personally, I would say no. I do enjoy chasing gear to an extent. I don't want to be chasing it for the rest of my life. I don't want Blizzard to, like, time gate everything so hard that it takes me years to get my BIS gear. I do not want that. But I do want to chase this Poxstorm sword that I'm chasing right now. That's an enjoyable experience for me. Once I get it, I will have lost something there where it's like I actually kind of wanted I enjoyed the chase. I don't want to chase forever, so it is good that the chase will eventually end. There's some like middle ground there that I really enjoy. But I'd love to know what you guys think about this. Do you play WoW for the challenge of it, to get achievements, for that, like, for the fun, or just for because you find the content fun? Are you playing it because you want to chase gear? Why are you guys in the game? Because I think it's actually a really interesting discussion. Let's move forward here. 112.25. Let me go up here. So this is about should Blizzard sort of make... JB mentioned tournament realms there, and he continues on sort of that train of thought
if
here.
you're on retail, every server
Or do you
is
keep that shit
the same
relaxed?
server, just with a different name.
So what JB is talking about right here is that should Blizzard make servers with different rule sets?
And a different like population, but they all work the same. I would love to see, with the however many servers we have out there, like hundreds of servers, I would love to see some where you have different, like increased XP gain, or the ability to like buy stuff off vendors, like all of your gear off vendors, or just come up with some stuff that's like a little bit different, that if you appreciate different aspects of the game, you can go to those servers that have different rule sets, and they can even kind of section those off. Like you could have.
So JB kind of rambles a little bit here, but that's okay. His main point is to simply say, like, should Blizzard create servers with different rule sets? And that's an interesting question. Again, I want to ask you guys, what do you think about the idea of Blizzard creating, let's say, a different realm over here? It's like Path of Exile, right? So every season there's a new Path of Exile league, but there's also like a solo self-found league. There's also just the normal standard league that you could be playing. Like, there's kind of different ways to approach the game. And Blizzard could take their servers and say, okay, here's a server over here. On this server, it's not a PTR server. It's just like a push server. We're going to call it a push server. What you can do on this server is you can buy all of your gear that you want, basically all of it. And then you can have the BIS gear, the BIS trinkets, the BIS everything, and you can try and push the highest Mythic Plus key that you could possibly try to push. So right now, let's say in the current Shadowlands season, a very, very good like Mythic Plus score would be like 3,500. That would be like quite good. If you're getting 3K IO right now, you're in like a pretty good, like right now I'm over 3K IO, and according to a couple websites, like I'm in the top like 3 to 5% of all players. So if you're at 3,500 rating.io, you'd be in the top 1% of all players. On this server realm thing that I'm suggesting, that JB is kind of suggesting, you could try to push like plus 35 keys, plus 40 keys maybe, because you're able to acquire all the absolute BIS kind of gear that you want. So like, would there be enough players interested in trying out these sort of alternative forms of play? I also think that Blizzard has sort of also already done this by reigniting Classic WoW and then TBC and now Wrath. Like, those are alternate ways to play World of Warcraft, and I think that like Blizzard's already kind of taken care of that. But I'd love to know what you guys think about that. Should Blizzard create alternative servers for like the live Shadowlands gameplay, or are they already doing enough with the classic servers that they've already created? An interesting question. Let's move forward once again. Nagura has a really good point here. 116.30. Nagura talks here about, could they make a boss rush mode for raid, which is exactly like Torghast. You know how in Torghast they made a boss rush mode?
Be interested. I know JB probably isn't. Actually, maybe. Maybe he would be. What would you think if they try something like a boss rush mode where you are raiding, but you don't have the trash in between? It's only a set amount of bosses, let's say 4 or 5, and maybe they are even from like any raid, like maybe one from Castle Nathria and then one from different raid. And
I think this is a cool idea.
It scales up like in Plus, but maybe I'm not sure if affixes would work for that, but basically just like an infinite scaling raid mode.
No, it's like boss rush from Lost Ark, except it's actually difficult and not a daily.
I think this is a really cool idea, actually. So again, you see that Blizzard has laid some of the foundations for these ideas already in the game. In Torghast, there's a boss rush mode now. There used to be there's the regular Torghast, now there's this boss rush mode, which everybody loves. You ask anybody who's done the boss rush mode in Torghast, they love it. It would be really interesting if partway through an expansion, so like right now in the Shadowlands life cycle, for example, you could do this where we're done raiding Castle Nathria, we're done raiding Sanctum, we're done raiding Sepulchre. Now you do a boss rush mode. Each week there are 5 bosses. Okay, I'm just gonna say 5. Let's say 4. There's 4 bosses each week. Okay, you go into this boss rush mode. There's no trash, but there is like an affix that's different, and the bosses have obviously been tuned so that they're appropriate to your eye level, and you just have to kill them. And I don't know what rewards they're gonna drop, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And on top of that, it's a different raid size. It's like an 8 to 10 player raid size. Okay? So you have 4 bosses to kill. There's a new affix for it. And there's a new raid size, which is like 8 to 10. And then it could have its own cosmetics maybe, or it could have gear from those bosses. But you could mix and match. So like week 1, you have Sludge Fist from Castle Nathria. You have the Guardian, not the Guardian fight, Painsmith from Sanctum, and Sylvanas from Sanctum, and then the final boss is from Sepulchre, and it's going to be Halandris. That's your 4 bosses for the week. 4, I'm doing forward. Those are your 4 bosses for this week. Next week, it'll be a different assortment of bosses. And like each week, it would change, and each week, it would just be really, really cool. I think that'd be such a cool idea. 8 to 10 players, 4 random bosses that are assorted from all the raids that you've collected over the course of that expansion. And you could have an affix if you want to as well. You don't even have to have an affix, actually. You could, but you could just scale the bosses up. I think it's a really cool idea. I want to know what you guys think about that. But I think that's a great idea from Nagura there, that a boss rush mode for raiding could be something that you introduce partway through a season, partway through an expansion of WoW. That would just be a really fun thing. That I would do that every week. I would do it every single week. I promise you. I think like Blizzard should start to move towards content that involves less players, not more. Again, like we said on the previous video, one of the biggest barriers to entry for Mythic raiding is that you need 20 people. It's just really awful that you need that many people. So I do hope they start to change things like that. Let's go to 123. We're moving right along here. 123.10. We're shifting gears a little bit into Dragonflight. And we're going to have some interesting thoughts from Max, first of all, on Dragonflight, and we're going to get into some of the talent tree stuff.
Something I've thought about a bit about Dragonflight, and I think we can kind of talk about Dragonflight, at least for a bit, is with them making it so the like main thing of the expansion is not some new thing they're creating that takes 2 years to be good. It's like an evergreen talent system that's like kind of exists for all of.
I think that's a massive, really important deal that I've talked about earlier, is that people are really thinking that Dragonflight's going to be just as bad as the other expansions. It's not, because they don't have to spend so much development time on a system that is kind of broken at launch and takes time to develop.
I'm sure there'll like be some like perks and shit like that throughout the expansion for ways they're going to do it. But have you guys thought about it all? How like 10.1, 10.2, and 10.3 are going to innovate with them taking a little bit of a step back from just adding borrowed power systems that are different every patch? I think what you could see them do is maybe actually, for the first time since Mythic Plus, actually look to kind of innovate the main game modes of the game more, because I think they'll have a lot more time to do that. So
I think that's an interesting point. And again, as we're seeing in Season 4, they are innovating. So, like, what Max is saying there is that there's no new system coming in Dragonflight that the devs have to work on. There is no Azurite system, right? I've talked about this before. So because there's no new system, they're just taking the talent trees, which the talent trees is a new system, but it's got all of the stuff that we already have. They don't have to remake it. They've got all the talents that we've already had and some from previous expansions. So all the content is there. They just have to balance it. That's it. And I know that's a big job, but it's not like they have to totally create a new system. So because they don't have to do that, they could instead innovate or iterate on the current Mythic Plus system and Raid system. And guess what? They're already doing that in Season 4. In Season 4, we're getting a mixed bag of Mythic Plus dungeons. So they're pulling, obviously, some from WoD. They're getting the Legion ones, which is Karazhan, upper and lower. We're getting the Battle for Azeroth ones, which is the Mechagon ones. So they're getting all these old dungeons, and they're bringing them in for a new dungeon pool. We've already been told in Dragonflight, they're going to give us 4 Dragonflight dungeons and then 4 from previous expansions, which, again, I think is actually a very cool idea. So they're shaking up the Mythic Plus system. Then in Season 4, we have a Fated Raid system, which is a rotating raid system with the new affix and gear that can be purchased with a vendor. Those are all brand new ideas for how to progress, how to iterate on Mythic Plus and on raiding, because we haven't had a major like change in those areas in a long time. And I agree with Max here that I think that Blizzard will have the time to spend developing those systems, listening to player feedback, alpha testing, beta testing, all those systems, because they're not working on a new borrowed power system that we're all going to hate in 2 years, right? I really do think that this is what's happening, which is great. Let me go to 130.
Conversations like that are actually pretty good because
you still have 20.
You can get, and it's just going to be fresh because you can choose things you haven't been able to choose before.
So Max is going to talk here about the talent trees having a lot of choice and like whether or not that's good or bad. I think he obviously thinks it's good.
That is totally okay.
And you can get, and it's just going to be fresh because you can choose things you haven't been able to choose before. But one thing I've heard from people is they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be like you're making all these like crazy decisions all the time. I want to warn people against that because I think, yes, that is the idea, but you know, you're not actually going like PoE is the best example of this.
Path of Exile. PoE is Path of Exile for you guys who don't know.
Game with like the infinite builds, and you guys have all seen the picture of that giant fucking confusing talent tree that like the Atlas tree, whatever the fuck it's called, and like you just like select whatever like thing you want. People are like, oh my god, there's so much choice, and it's like, yeah, maybe for someone that is like making that build, but like let's be real, like almost all of you dudes just copy someone's build who figured it out. Like that like cool creative process of figuring it out in today's day and age is going to be done by someone, uploaded to YouTube or some website or forum, and then people are going to just use that thing. So that
not me, baby. So that's true. Here's what's interesting, right? Going into Dragonflight, like right now, we don't have a lot of choice in terms of the talents. Let's be real. There's Enhancement Shaman is maybe one of the better, one of the outliers right now because there's so many different builds you can run. Wish Doctor Wolfbones, Fire build, an Ascendance build, focus on Stormstrike, yada yada. But generally speaking, there's a cookie cutter talent build that everybody on some website has told you to do, and you're going to do it regardless of, like, depending on what content you're doing, right? And I think that that's actually bad for the game. You guys have heard me say this a million times. The new Dragonflight talent trees are so big and so vast. They have so much choice in them, and that's a really good thing for the game. Yes, there still will be people who come up with whatever cookie cutter build you're supposed to do, but for players like me who want to experiment and run around and try different builds that are crazy, this new Dragonflight talent tree system is so incredibly good. It is the best thing that I could have asked for. So I'm really happy that I get to be creative with this new system, and I hope you guys are too. But I don't think anybody should be worried about, like, oh my gosh, there's too many choices. Like, I'm not going to know what to do. It's like somebody will find the cookie cutter build for you, and you can go look it up. And I promise you it'll be on every website just like it is now. None of that's going to change. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. JB has a thought on this as well, which I think is really basically kind of sums it up. Let me go to here. Right there. Here's JB.
Another thing about the talent trees that I am excited for is that I think it'll make people really evaluate how important things are to them on their class, and it'll cause you to, you know, when abilities are baseline, you don't have to think about whether that ability is good or not. You have it. It's just, you know, there's no decision there. You just have it. I think it'll be interesting to force certain class communities to really stop and say, like, how important is that ability?
I think that's actually important. I think that's really important. I think, again, this is something that I love about the game. Some people hate this. They want to be told exactly how to build their character, and then they want to do it, and that's fine. That's actually a perfectly legitimate way to play this game. But I do think that this new system will force you to think a little bit about your abilities and what's important to them. And for the players who want to think about those abilities, it'll give them the opportunity to do so, which is great. So, like, I'm going into Upper Karazhan. No, sorry, that's not giving me Dragonflight. In Dragonflight, I'm going into some dragon dungeon, okay? And I have a choice on my tree. Let's say I'm playing, like, the Druid tree has been introduced to us, right? You have a lot of different options for crowd control. You could go and get the Skull Bash, which is the kick. So that's a kick that you can get for Druid. And then you could also go over and get the Solar Beam, which is going to, for Moonkin. So you could have a Moonkin that has so much extra utility, and that could just be, like, one of the ways in which you help your group is going and getting, you're sacrificing a lot to do it, but you're getting all this extra utility. That's, like, amazing and will help you guys to time the key. So, again, I love the talent trees in terms of the choices that they're going to offer us, and I think it will force players to think differently about their kits than they do right now. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. 145.50. Let me go. This is where I want to be. This is Nagura and Max talking about AoE in Mythic Plus. This is interesting.
Something that Nagura brought up on Twitter the other day. You said that Blizzard needs to, there's a lot of, like, different ways you can do damage in this game. There's, like, 2-target cleave and funnel, and, like, classes do some things differently than others, but you mentioned that, like, spammable mass AoE should be normalized and, like, balanced among every class in the game.
I think that's an interesting idea.
For some reason haven't, like, heard that take before, but that 100% needs to happen. Like, it's actually the weirdest thing. I think probably needed to happen since Mythic Plus more than anything else, because it gets handled in a raid, but that is something that they should pay they should pay as close attention to that in PvE as they do single target, because it's just a massive reason why there's a game mode that so many people play in PvE that doesn't it, like, affects every decision people make, basically.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think Blizzard kind of tried to band-aid fix this issue that, like, mass AoE is, like, almost exclusively the only thing that it needed in Plus, by trying to put things into in Plus, like affixes and whatever, that promote, like, single target damage or other forms of.
Yeah, you can tell that Blizzard has tried to, like, solve the capped AoE versus uncapped AoE without touching the classes. They tried to do it on the other side, which was over here to say, well, we'll change the dungeons so that it works better for people who have capped AoE
damage. And it just never worked out. Like, all the things they put in, there was, like, singular mobs. People either skipped them or pulled stuff on top and AoE'd anyway.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Because in the end, over the 3 seasons or 3 expansions that we had in Plus now, it was always the classes that did the most like stacked AoE damage and burst AoE damage that were brought to the group. And I still think that it's not like perfectly balanceable, even if they attempt to balance stacked AoE, just because there's only 3 damage dealers that fit into a dungeon, and it's just really impossible. But they can at least attempt doing it, so classes that are the worst at M+ right now are at least not like doing 50% less damage than the best, right?
Yeah, so I think Nagura's got a really good point here that there's no reason why Blizzard shouldn't be able to give mass AoE to every single spec in the game. So I play Outlaw Rogue and Enhancement Shaman right now, and they are some of the worst mass AoE classes in the game. And like I've said to many of you guys in a lot of my videos, and I will stick to this, that like I still think that those classes are very useful in Mythic Plus. Absolutely is the case. But I do 50% less damage than Kaz on his Warlock, or Hero on his Warlock, or even, you know, there's like Survival Hunters, Sleep on his Survival Hunter. They will do double my damage or more on a big AoE pack if we pull big. They will. And that is like a problem. And what I think they could do is very simple. There's so much flavor in each of the different specs that you could easily accomplish this goal. Basically, like for Enhancement Shaman, you make something like Fire Nova baseline, because we already have Lava Lash spreading Flame Shocks now, okay? I don't think you should change the cap on Enhancement Shaman for Flame Shocks past 6, because Fire Nova will hit everybody anyway, right? So there still needs to be some sort of skill expression. I think something like the Windwalker Monk just having Spinning Crane Kick and like is just like, I don't know. It's a bad design, because if you get like a Chi-Ji proc, you're foregoing your mastery altogether just to spin and spin and spin, and that's not how the class is supposed to be played. So they need to fix some of the way that that mass AoE is done right now. And then I think for Enhancement Shaman, for example, they could easily make it so like put Fire Nova on like a 3-second cooldown, and then you can have tons of AoE damage. Like that's all you really have to do. Lower the cooldown of Fire Nova. Like maybe make it a talent. I don't know. I think you should make it baseline, for example, and then you should make a talent that buffs it and like reduces the cooldown drastically and makes it do more damage. I don't know. Maybe make it refresh all the Flame Shocks that are out there. There's ways to make it so that that's possible. The point is simply to say every single class should have uncapped AoE, I think. And there should be some classes that are better at it, but everybody should have a baseline entry of uncapped AoE, and then it would make all the other specs really interesting, like Enhancement Shaman, because Enhancement Shaman has really good funnel, really good 2-target cleave. So then you could bring those classes because they have those other strengths. Right now, lots of people don't want to bring Enhancement Shaman or Outlaw Rogue simply because they don't have uncapped AoE. And it doesn't matter what their other utility is. It doesn't matter that Enhancement Shaman can run Primal Lava Actuators and funnel ridiculous amounts of Lava Lash damage into a priority target. Doesn't matter because they don't have uncapped AoE. So I think you need to bring everybody up to the uncapped AoE standard, which is like right here. And then on top of that, you can have specialists who are like bad at single target, bad at cleave, but they're amazing at uncapped AoE. Something like a Windwalker Monk or a Destro Lock, maybe. I don't know. And then the other classes like me on my Enhancement Shaman, I'm still relevant because I'm doing my 2-target cleave, my funnel, and I have uncapped AoE as well. I really think that Blizzard should look at doing something like that. Keep the specializations of things like that enhancement shamans have with funnel damage, or even Outlaw Rogue with Blade Flurry. Keep the cool specializations, but bring everybody up to the same level when it comes to a baseline of uncapped AoE. I think that's pretty important, actually. That's about it for me, guys. JB does finish talking a little bit here about Mythic Plus and kind of the appeal of Mythic Plus. They talk a little bit about, like, should you get a new suite of Mythic Plus dungeons, just like raids do? And, of course, Blizzard is experimenting with that with Season 4. So, this is really... The future, I think, of World of Warcraft is actually really awesome, really interesting, and I think it's really bright. Number one, I think that Season 4 is going to provide a really cool, like, petri dish kind of testing ground for, will all these systems work? How does it work if we introduce old dungeons? How is the loot from old dungeons going to be? What does all that look like? You know, when we do all these old dungeons, is that actually fun? Are people going to enjoy going back and doing WoD dungeons, Karazhan? And then when we get to Dragonflight, it's going to be the same. 4 Dragonflight dungeons, 4 old dungeons. Are we going to enjoy this system? They're testing it right now in Season 4. The Fated Raid affix that's coming in, is that going to be a cool feature? Are we going to enjoy doing Castle Nathria and Sanctum again, bringing them up? That rotating weekly schedule, like these new systems that they're introducing, they're going to bring them into Dragonflight. You bet your bottom dollar they're going to bring it in. Now, that's all going to depend on how well they are received in Season 4. So I think that Season 4 is going to be not only a ton of fun, but a really, really great moment for WoW, for the devs to be like, okay, this is how we iterate on Mythic Plus. This is how we iterate on Raids. This is the next evolution of those systems and how great we think we can make them. And it's really up to us players to give them the feedback that they need to ensure that these systems end up being really good moving into Dragonflight and beyond. That's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching part 2. I know they're long, but again, skip around. I'll have timestamps for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to drop a like, I'd really appreciate it. If you haven't subbed to the channel yet, please go hit that big red button. It helps me out a lot. And if you want to support the future of what I'm doing here, there's also a link to my Patreon. There's several different layers. Some are as low as $5. And if you want to support me on a monthly basis, I would also really appreciate that too. Thank you guys so much for watching. I love you all. I'll see you in the next one.